My name is Jean-Pierre Lacroix, or JP as they call me, and I'm president of SLD, a global brand consulting firm that really specializes in helping financial institutions manage transformation. I'm here to talk about a really important subject, one that actually I was never planned. Kevin and Larry, what's the last one he talks about? The importance of communities, right? How communities drove sales of those two, the young family, the daughter and mother, and the soap. We talked about creating those communities. And that's what I talk about. I'm going to talk about the future of community banking. And it's so funny. About 8 months ago, I had a conversation with Jeff from Financial Brands Forum. We were having a conversation about, hey, JP, I'd like you to come and speak at this conference. What would you like to talk about? And I said, I really want to talk about the future of community banking because there's some major trend forecasting every year. And we said there's some interesting trends happening in the marketplace that are impacting community banking. And I think we need to take a closer look at what those factors are. And that's what we're going to talk about today. And I was this morning getting my Starbucks, my ritual, and gentleman behind me, Jesse, asked me from a fintech company, hey, GP, what's the big trends happening in banking today? I mean, you do work around the world. What's the big trends happening in banking? I said, the game when we were kids, we played the musical chairs. How many of you played the musical chairs here when you were kids? Yeah, right? Trying to get that chair before be able to have a seat so you don't get knocked out. And that's what I told them. I said, the future of community banking or banking is like that musical chair. And I'm going to share with you some strategies to ensure that you have a seat in the future. And the future of banking is really important. Now, this presentation, the data is about 180 slides. So obviously, I'm not going to get through 180 slides. So I'm giving you the kind of the Reader's Digest version. There's a barcode at the end of my presentation that you can download the research studies that we derived a lot of this presentation, and you have my email address also. If you want to ask further questions, we can dive deeper into the data. A little bit about SLD. I just want to ground you that we're coming to you with a lot of experience and insights. These are the financial institutions we can work with, have done work around the globe. We have an office in Shanghai. People say, well, JP, why did you have an office in China? Why do you work in Europe and other countries? And I said, it's interesting. The future is already here. It's just not evenly distributed. We learned so much from Europe on the future of open banking, something that's going to be happening here. It started to happen. Also, channel strategy, Millennial Bank, they have reinvented banking in Portugal. And their massive growth. They reinvented their banking model. You have Barclays in the UK. And then you have in Canada, RBC and TD. Here in the US, JP Morgan Chase, and a variety of other financial institutions. So we learn a lot from these financial institutions where the future is heading. And that's where we spend a lot of our time. Future-proofing financial institutions, ensuring that you remain relevant, not just for today, but long-term. Because when you think about it, a transformation that happens in your financial institution takes how long? 5, 10 years, right? By the time you finish renovating your branches and adopting this new digital transformation platform, it takes 5 to 10 years before you hit fruition. And so it's really important to understand where the future is. And that's where we spend a lot of our time. We do a lot of research. That was the gentleman that coined the phrase, the blink factor, 35 years ago. I saw then that the emotional connection between consumers and brands was pivotal, and it was only going to grow. And look at today. Emotional decision-making is 90% of all decision-making your customers make in banking, believe it or not. And the most loyal customers are those who are the most emotionally connected to your brand. When mobile banking started, we did a study. We coined the phrase mobile zombie. We wanted to find out how do people use mobile devices in the branches. There's a new form of digital signage. When digital banking and digital transformation was happening, I said, what does that mean for consumers? What's the underside, the yang of this yin that's happening in the marketplace? Well, we discovered that the more you move consumers to digital-only platforms, which was at the time the most exciting thing happening in banking, the less loyal they were. Your most loyal customers in our study identified were were those that used all your channels. And then other studies, McKinsey, Accenture, came out years later to validate what we had already identified years ahead of time. And then digital transformation, the other insight, this is a really important insight, was what we have in banking today is, I'll call it flat curve. When it comes to conventional banking elements like customer service, products, convenience, they become table stakes. What isn't table stakes? And what is driving growth now in the future is providing sound financial advice. And by the way, banks score 5%. When we ask consumers, where do you go for financial advice? Well, 5% of consumers identify their financial institution. We identified, that study was done last year. And then omni-channel, we want to find out, well, we're going from omni-channel to what? Well, seamless banking. Well, what does seamless banking mean for consumers? Right? So we looked at it a little bit, and now I'm sharing this study on the future of community banking. And there's other studies. We did a big study on DEI. We did a study on branch renovation ROI. We did a study on digital signage ROI. So you can find all of those studies on our website, including the one I'm presenting today. That's just to ground you that we're very focused on where the future is, and for you to remain relevant in the marketplace. So the big question we asked as part of our study is the definition of community banking changing? We know that community has an important role to play in driving loyalty. We heard Kevin O'Leary talk about it in the previous presentation. But is that shift in the definition of community banking causing attrition or driving loyalty? And we're going to get under the hood of these two, attrition and loyalty. And that's one of the key insights that came out of our study. We asked actually 4,000 respondents, 3,500 consumers. We asked national bank customers, we asked regional bank customers, we asked community bank customers, we asked credit union customers, we asked online-only customers. We want to have a diversity of types of channels that consumers bank with and get an insight which channels are winning, which channels are losing. And then we went out and asked 500 bankers. Probably some of you in this room participated in our study. We want to find out, is there correlation between what consumers are saying and what bankers are saying? Or there's a disconnect? Because it's really important that what you see and what you believe in is what's happening in the marketplace. And the good news is there's a lot of correlation, there's a lot of alignment, and there's also some key areas. You think you're doing a better job in community banking than your customers are. There's a key insight that surprised us. We also sought the advice of experts in the industry. This was a huge study. I want to make sure that we provided the level of expertise. I sought Margaret Brown. Margaret Brown is the author of Blueprint to Customer Obsession. How many of you have read his book? Well, you got to read the book. It's incredible. It's an incredible book. He's the ex-executive of JP Chase, Amazon, Microsoft, and then for data science, I went to Dr. John Hughes, who used to be the data science at JP Chase, PNC, and a variety of other financial institutions. So I asked them to help me with the data, to really understand, get on the hook, understand the correlations of these different attitudes and behaviors happening amongst consumers who do their banking. Before we get into the results of the research, I think it's really important for us to get grounded in the context that study was done. There's a rising sense of financial anxiety in the marketplace. Let me ask you, just room temperature, how many of you have anxiety today? Come on, be honest, come on. AI is going to replace our jobs, right? ATM, technology is another, it's going to replace our functions. There's fewer financial institutions in the marketplace. For consumers, am I going to be able to pay my mortgage? Is there going to be a recession? Are these trade wars going to impact my livelihood? Am I going to lose my job? These are all huge factors impacting how they perceive their relationship with you. When they come into your financial institution, they have an extreme high degree of anxiety. And by the way, it's global. It's not just the US, Canada. It's everywhere. It's full of anxiety. This level of anxiety is creating a new epidemic. loneliness. We did a huge study this year for the retail sector on the growing concern of mental illness due to loneliness. And why is that relevant to you? Well, you're community banks. You're creating communities, right? And what is loneliness? It's the lack of belonging. It's the sense of isolation, hopelessness. Financial institutions, as we heard Kevin O'Leary, there are two essential businesses. There's banking and energy, right? You're an essential business to people's livelihoods. Not having access, feeling isolated, not having the information they need to make the right financial decisions is adding to this level of anxiety and mental illness. And it's only going to grow, folks. It's only going to grow. And you have a key place. Our study asked the question, is there a role for financial institutions to help us? And the answer resoundingly is yes. So when you start thinking you're going to two-part strategy, how are you dealing with this? The other key factor is there's 3,800 fewer financial institutions in 2004. That's a 50% attrition. That's not my numbers, that's FDIC. 50% attrition, 20 years. So let me ask you a question. 10 years from now, what do you think that number's going to look like? We follow this trajectory, we're going to be in 1,500 financial institutions 10 to 15 years from now. What does that mean? That means there's going to be some winners and losers. And I'm here to give you optimism. I'm here to share with you that this research and owning communities is a vital element of your survival. It is a key driver of growth. It's tough to achieve. All right? It's not a band-aid solution. It has to be core to your DNA. It has to drive your purpose. You have to rethink how you approach communities and your role in the community. It's interesting, I was looking at FDIC have a rating called CRA, and that's about Community Reinvestment Act. And that's financial institutions that commit financially to their communities. And they actually put the number of how much they commit to the community. How many institutions do you think were on that list? Anybody want to guess? Anybody say 1,000? 500? 1,500? There are 61 institutions that walk the talk about community commitment. That's a huge opportunity for you. That's a huge opportunity to capitalize. Here's the other insight. We asked consumers, when you think of an institution or a class of business that provides vitality to the community, you ranked at the bottom, 8%. You and supermarkets, right? Obviously churches, but clubs, fitness centers, things of those elements had a stronger factor in driving vitality in the community. This is a huge opportunity for you folks. This is the number you need to change, 8%. You need to change that number. You should be number one. And by the way, bankers we interviewed, you were number one. What a gap, right? Huge opportunity. I'm going to show you through the study what we can do. And why community banking is so important? Because it's got the attention of the national banks. JP Morgan Chase have a new program in Harlem. I don't know if you've heard about it. The community bank for the underbank. They're going to open 30 of these across the U.S. Regions, Santana, Bank of America. These are all large institutions that have identified the importance of a commitment to the community. They have deep pockets. That puts risk at the heart of regional, community, and credit unions. By the way, how many of you are credit unions in this room? So, and national banks, regional bank, one national bank, regional banks. Okay, so we're all at risk, folks. If we don't own community, and by the way, the definition of community is being redefined. It's no longer about transactions, about being close to the customer. Those are important, but guess what? They're table stakes. All banks do that. We did this huge study, the state of banking. We interviewed 80 financial institutions in 10 different countries. We wanted to find out what is driving attrition, what's driving loyalty. And what we discovered was surprisingly that products and services, level of service, deal stakes. What drove loyalty was the quality of advice. What drove growth was the quality of advice. Now, what we're going to discover today is that being committed to the community, being involved in the community, and providing new strategies of how you engage in the community are a key driver of growth. So, being part of the community matters. Because our research showed that being part of the community means this. It means reducing the financial anxiety of your customers. It means providing a sense of belonging and purpose. That's what the very definition of community banking is. It's not about convenience, being close to the customer. It's not about products and services. It's not about knowing the customer, because honestly, those are table stakes. And why so many institutions are paying attention to this, we ask the question, is the commitment of your financial institution driving loyalty? 58% said yes, significant. 21% said extremely impactful their loyalty to your financial institution. So being part of the community matters to your customers. It's not table stakes. It's a differentiator. It's a point of difference. It's made you relevant. And ensures your relevancy long term, because doing this is not easy, folks. Doing this is not easy. It's a lot easier to launch a series of products. A lot easier digital transformation, digital channels. It's a lot harder. Because what does this involve? It involves disciplines you normally don't do. What's the one thing that JP Morgan Chase did when they did their community bank, underbank? They hired a community manager. Their sole role in that bank, in that branch, was to build relationships with the community. They developed programs, and they sustained those programs. So we say it's really important, but then we ask the question, how are banks doing at this part of the community, commitment to the community? Not well. 70% said, not so good. 30% said, yeah, they're satisfied. By the way, a lot of those were credit union customers. If I were to give you an insight, those who are community banks here, you're the most, let me reframe. My original presentation was the end of community banking, the end of community banks, long live community banking. And then Jeff said, hey, I think it's got to be around it. It's got to be for everyone, not just targeting community banks. But the reality is community banks are the most vulnerable to attrition. I have a separate presentation on community banks. It's kind of scary. And why is it that being involved in the community is so important? Because 42% of customers want to spend more time involved in the community. Loneliness, sense of belonging, right? We're seeing this, global trade shrinking. People are hunkering down to be close to the community, wanting to be involved in the community. And what does being involved in the community mean? It means involved in social media apps, association clubs, groups, and clubs. So my question to you here, how many of you have strategies where you have programs that target associations? You're there with the association. How many of you have programs tied to association? 1, 2, 4, 5, 6, about 10 of you. How many of you have programs where you tie to groups and clubs? You're there at the groups and clubs. Good for you, kudos. Right? For the rest of you, you need to be there. Because that's where communities are being created. That's where you're going to get credit for being part of the community. Because you're where the customers are. If you're going to go fishing, you fish where the fish are. If you're going to kill some customers, you need to go where the customers are. The other thing that startled us, this was like this was kind of out of left field. We didn't expect this. There's confusion about what community banking is. We asked consumers, and specifically it's the regional community bank customers were very confused. We asked them, we gave them For each category, we gave them 12 leading institutions. It's hopefully help frame what a community bank is, what a regional bank is. And a huge portion of the response when we said other identified national banks or super regionals. There's confusion about community. I think that's an opportunity. You have an opportunity to redefine what community banking is all about. You already own community banking. You're there. You're the most at risk to lose community banking also. And why is that happening? Why is that confusion happening? Because different types of institutions, from national banks, regional banks, credit unions, online only, you talk differently about your value to the community. You talk community, but how you deliver that community is very different. And that adds to the confusion. And that's a problem, folks. It's a problem because it's driving attrition. We asked in the next couple of years, are you considering moving your business to another financial institution? 40% said yes. And that mirrors our stealth attrition study that we did in 2017. The reality is you're not losing those customers. You're losing those valuable, high-margin products that those customers represent. They're keeping their checking and savings with you. Hey, why go through the hassle with that mortgage, that loan, that business loan? Maybe that was investments. I have somewhere else for that. And by the way, community banks, that number is in the 50s. So what's that causing? It's actually going to cause 2 to 3 years from now, changing landscape. Talked about the chairs and making sure that the musical chairs that you have a seat. So we asked the question, okay, if you're going to leave your financial institution, where are you going? Let's start with national banks. They have high loyalty. 53% stay within national banks. They may leave their financial institution, but they're going to stay within the grouping of banks. But they're going to lose to credit unions. So credit unions, if you want to target customers for growth, target national banks, right? And then target community banks. If you look at regional banks, this is 33% stay within that. 27% are going to national banks, and 21% to credit unions. So I'm going through these. I want you to think about who's winning in this race. Which class of banking is winning, and which class of banks are losing. Credit unions, look at 52% are staying. First to the national banks, but you're losing them to online only. Maybe because your digital transformation is not as advanced, or maybe there's other factors. Online only, I put it in here for, say, 40%. Online only customers, if they're going to change, they're going to consider national banks and less so credit unions. And then finally, community banks. 35% will stay with the community banks. 20% national banks and 23% credit union. So the winners in this changing landscape are going to be national banks and credit unions. The big losers are going to be regional and community banks. If you let things go the way they're going, if you don't make a commitment to the community, you put community strategies in place. So we looked at, what is this all about? Well, we looked at the positive scores. Hey, listen, these look great, these numbers, right? 80%, this is top rate satisfaction. Someone to extremely satisfied. National banks, 80%. Credit unions, 81. Online only banks, 75. Regional banks, 73. And community banks, 64. You said, GP, what are you talking about? This looks really good. Yes. Depends on how you look at the numbers. We don't look at the positive scores. We look at the scores that are driving attrition. Because those of us are in the battle, right? They may be happy, but what about the rest? So what we found out is the negative scores have the biggest factor for attrition. And here's another huge insight that came out of the study. Dr. Yu said, HEB, there are two buckets of factors. There's a bucket that drives attrition. No matter how well you do with these factors, you're not going to drive growth. What you're going to stop is your customers leaving you. But it's not going to drive growth. And you have another bucket that's driving growth. And they're different. And they're actually harder to achieve. Because these are the ones that differentiate in the marketplace. So we're focusing on the attritional ones. You know, things like the institution values align with my values, product and services, feel welcome, valued. They almost always deliver the outcome. Treat with dignity. Those are really important. But the ones that drove the most attrition are these. Obviously, products and services. And what? Well, it's obvious, right? If it's commoditized category, there's an expectation that Bank A and Bank B and Bank C, they should be equal, right? I just have a relationship with Bank A, but if I change, they should be the same products and services. There shouldn't be a big gap. And GD Power does a really good job of ranking the financial institutions. Kudos to them. But really, when you look at that bandwidth between the worst case and the best case, it's a very narrow bandwidth. Because you're not going into business and banking to give your customers a bad service, are you? Are you going to give them shitty products? You're going to get up in the morning and go, oh boy, we're really going to screw these customers. We're going to give them a shitty product. No, I don't think so. But those are table stakes. They drive attrition. They don't drive growth. Because the customers are expecting these. You're not wowing them. Right? So what is wowing them? Is shareable community experiences. Those are the things that drive growth. That was the big aha for us. You know, I was talking at a banking conference last year in the fall in Charlotte. And I was amongst a group of bankers and we're like, oh, you know, my customers, they don't really want to come to a branch. You know, they want to do everything online. Why go to the branch? It's, you know, it's drudgery. It's a lot of work. And at first, you know, I go, yeah, I agree, you know. Then I stopped and thought, shame on you. If you think that, shame on you. You haven't given them a reason to come to a financial institution, a branch. You made it hard for them. You reduce the number of tellers. You force them to go to the ATMs. You change your banking hours. Let me ask them a question. When's the last time your customers gave you a glowing remark, how amazing that experience was? Raise your hand. How many of you get those? Good, good. Our study showed you get them, but you don't get them often. These are the drivers of growth. These are the factors. And guess what? They're all tied to committee. Look at the bottom one. We did a study on the future retail banking in, I think it was 2015, we wrote a book on it. And access to experts beyond banking, such as fitness, it's the same percentage. There's an unmet need here, folks. There's financial institutions in the UK that have yoga classes as part of their branches. They have training courses. What you do really well is local staff hiring and training programs. You do a really good job with those things, especially with credit unions and community banks. Volunteer network is really important. But things like the online network that allows the creation of local clubs. How many of you have created those? Nobody. How about small business hub? How many have done small business hubs? Nobody. You've got a volunteering network where you're going to offer people to volunteer?
Yes.
There you go. 10 of you. Local staff hire. Come on, you should all have your hands up, right? No? Okay. So opportunity. These factors create shareable moments. When you think of NPS score, Net Promoter Score, it's all great. It's about service, it's about that. But if you think of the clear confirmation of an NPS score, is when they give you a recommendation. They tell you how great it is. 27% of your customers have never given you a recommendation. 32% 2 to 4 recommendations. Not good. Yeah, they are. But not much. Not often. Again, I want to ground you. This is driving growth. This is driving loyalty. This is making a connection with the community. The other thing is constant renewal. The idea that you're constantly evolving your offering. People want to be part of a leader. They want to belong to to a progressive company. They want to belong to someone who has a purpose. They want to belong to an organization that's successful. They want to find ways to improve their products and services. When I do business with them, it frequently feels like they had me in mind. When I have a problem with their employees, are empowered to help. These are percentage of mentions 2+ times. These are key drivers of mentions. The key drivers of mentions are these 1.6 times mentions. This 1.6 times mentions at the 2+ recommendations level. Deeply invest in the community it serves. Foster a sense of connection by supporting initiatives and celebrating community achievements. Serving underbanked. Provide financial advice. Institutions promotes messages of hope and optimism. Staff are trained to show respect. Support local businesses and commitment to community. These are the key factors that connect you to the community. They solve the customer's definition of community. Removes financial anxiety. Provides me a sense of belonging and a sense of purpose. These two things. So now it's going to wrap it up with some action plans, some things that you can take away. And to do that, what we did was we looked at those factors that I listed, decided to tell others about my experience, constantly find ways to improve all of those factors. And then the top 2 boxes, the positive mentions, national banks, regional banks, community banks, credit unions. Bright green, great score. Darker green, okay score. Pink, you're in trouble. Look at the underbanked. Serving the underbanked. Right, score, and then you can get a sense. So what we've done is I've taken this data and for each of the banking categories, provided things that you need to amplify, things you do well that you need to continue to do well. Fixes, these are the things that you need to solve. They're driving attrition. They're getting in the way of driving loyalty, but they're also driving loyalty if you solve it. And then launch, things that you may not be doing that you should be doing. So let's start with national banks. For the gentleman here sitting up front, amplify your strengths, constantly improve. National banks are known for that. They're always evolving. A new app, a new service, a new product, a new branch design, a new something, right? Empowering employees. They've done a good job of moving those decisions at the branch level. They could constantly do that. That idea of empowering the employees. Promote optimistic messages. Staff are trained to show respect for diverse backgrounds. Now that one I was shocked. I'm a big believer in DEI, but I'm also a big believer in, because our studies show that DEI is a key driver of growth. But I'm also a big believer in DEI is not applicable for every location. That there are markets where it is not applicable, right? But DEI is still important. Things that they need to fix, account vulnerability, create shareable experiences, they don't do that. Customer-centric focus. I remember we were working with TD and they did this activation program. I don't know if you've heard about it, where the ATM was a fake ATM box. Somebody would come up and put their card in, and then out came a box. The gift was either a free holiday ticket or something. And it gave the wow factor. And their whole strategy at TD is wow factor. And it got millions of views. Millions of views. Right? And it helped their NPS scores. Customer centricity, focus. Large financial institutions, more about you bank around our needs versus banking around your needs. They're invest in the community. They're not doing that. Celebrating community achievements, support financial literacy, support local business, commitment to the community. Large national banks are not doing that. That is a vulnerability for them. That is an opportunity for you. Because if you own this, if you have competitive advantage over them, bigger than money. And then the launch their underbank programs, as you saw JP Morgan Chase has done. I think that Bank of America is also doing that. Regional banks, amplify your strengths, empower employees, promote optimistic message, staff are trained to show respect and diversity. The fix is constant improvement. I mean, regional banks are, and I'd say community banks have struggled with their digital transformation. We're seeing it here. Deeply invest in the communities. You're not doing that. Support local business and commitment to the community. So you see, these are huge factors. Launch great shareable experiences, customer-centric focus, foster a sense of connection, serve the underbanked, and provide financial literacy programs. These are what the regional banks need to do. Community banks amplify strengths of our employees. Staff are trained to show respect and diversity. You can see that's fairly consistent. Community banks fix your development, invest in the community, celebrate the community achievements, promote messages of hope. These should be core. This should be core to your business. This should be the foundation. These should be the things you need to amplify, not the things you need to fix. So we got low scores, high attrition. And then the launch is extensive, create shareable experiences, improvement, customer centricity, serving the underbanked, support financial literacy, support local businesses, commitment to the community. Credit unions, you got lots of good things going on. You can see why. You have very loyal customers, constant improvement, empowering employees, deeply investing in the community, promote messages of hope. Staff are trained to show respect, diverse backgrounds, and commitment to the community. You guys do that well. What you need to fix, create shareable experiences. You're not capitalizing on the good things you're doing. You're just not capitalizing on them. Celebrate community achievements, support local businesses. They're going to launch customer centricity, serving the underbanked, provide financial literacy programs. And that kind of wraps up the strategies. And if I want to summarize this, there are two main factors, one driving attrition, one driving growth. The factors driving attrition have become table stakes. Things like service, product offering, customer centricity. These are tables, you have to be doing those to stay in business. It's like we were doing a positioning exercise in the Climate Army, and our value proposition is trust. And I'm going, no, trust is the foundation of any brand. You can't build your foundation on trust. Right? So you can't build your value proposition on trust. It's given. If you don't have trust with your customers, you don't have the brand. Right? So it's understanding that these attrition factors are not going to drive growth. It's going to drive growth with shareable moments committed to the community. Why is that important? Because consumers today are willing to spend more for an experience than a product. Young generations want to know your purpose, your commitment to the community, the value you bring that is beyond finance. Those are the important factors. I have here to wrap it up. I'll open up the questions. The barcode for the studies, you can download those. If you email me, I'll send you this presentation. And if you really want a lot of abuse, I'll send you the tables that came, the 180 slides that came from this data analysis. I'm happy to share those with you. Have fun. Any questions? Does this resonate with you?
Yeah.
All right. So what's the takeaway? What would you like tomorrow? You're going to go say, what did you learn at the conference? What are you going to say that you learned at the conference? I'd love to hear from you.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So when you say create shareable experiences, do you literally mean experiences you can share on social media?
Yep, social media or in the branch. A shareable experience could be a training program. It could be you part of the community. I'm just soon the release of a call the Think Blink Manifesto. It will be released in June. And I had the chance to interview Regina DeMars from First National Bank of Oklahoma. If you want to see an institution that's doing it right, go visit their social media platform. By the way, I'm curious, how many of you here are B Corporation? Kudos to you, that's a hard thing to achieve. Expect to see more B corporations in banking. If you're really truly committed to the community, B Corp is the way to the community. But even B Corp need some opportunities to leverage these points. Anything else you learned today that you would apply to your?
It's not a question. And then, what's age demographic?
We had every age. We started, I think, at 16 to 75 plus. So we looked at generational segment, Gen Zs, Gen Xs, all of those. We have all that happening. And there is variances, there's differences between the age groups, but we thought they would be significant. We were surprised they weren't. And we also clustered them based on suburban, urban, suburban, and rural customer segments. And we didn't see any change there either. So quite surprised thinking a rural would have a bigger influence, but no. Any other questions or comments or thoughts? Yeah.
Well, for financial literacy, it seems like
because common people is important. We do a lot for adults, but what is the perceived value of financial literacy for kids that are school-age kids, say even grade school or middle school? Because for a lot of bankers and credit unions, that's a long-term play of making an impact at that young age. On the other hand, maybe it's seen as a positive thing for the community to really invest in the school. So is there any data on that to support that?
There's no data other than the fact that if you're committed to the community, you can be, and it's inclusive, as they've identified here in your study. Inclusive means kids and adults. And the reality is, you want to be, like, if there's anything, the challenge is to be able to speak to these kids because there's so many rules and laws where you can't talk to them. You have an opportunity to talk to kids about banking. I'd fully embrace it because they're your future customers. You have one chance to make a first impression. At that age, that's a huge opportunity for you. And what does it say to the committee when you do that? That you're committed to that. You're committed. It's not about selling a product. You're committed. Any other questions? Well, thank you very much. Thank you for your time.